Hi everyone. Any discussion of fugue types and their classification can encounter several problems, such as the labeling of certain fugues has not necessarily been standardized. Often the labels describing certain types of fugue were changed or modified during different eras, and many terms attempt to unify with a single label, a composition type which in many instances doesn't follow any single structural plan or may include several processes for which the label alone doesn't account. For example, the old term counter-fugue, used to describe a fugue whose subject and answer are in contrary motion, refers only to this feature, but neglects any others which the fugue may possess, such as if the counter-fugue subject and answer are also in stretto. Also, many composers may not be as strict with a device's usage as a label implies. A fugue whose subject and answer are presented initially in stretto, for example, may later also include entries where they are used separately. Possibly as a response to these issues, nowadays many of the older terms have been discontinued, replaced or modified, and the processes of a fugue, with some exceptions, are now typically outlined within a discussion of the fugue. This allows its description to be more specific in terms of the process or processes which it may include. This, however, has not necessarily eliminated the use of general fugue labels or omitted their potential ambiguity. For example, many fugues include stretto passages during their middle or concluding areas, but not all fugues have their subject and answer in stretto from the fugue's beginning. The label stretto fugue, then, will probably refer only to fugues whose subject uses this process from the outset, but may also sometimes refer to any fugue where the use of stretto is prominent. In this video then, I will briefly discuss several fugue classifications which may be encountered, some of which, as already mentioned, may have been discontinued, replaced or modified. In the second video, I will look at probably the four main fugue types which have acquired some level of classification standardization. As already stated, a counter-fugue subject and answer are presented in contrary motion. The subject and answer of Contrapuntus 16 from J.S. Bach's Art of the Fugue, for example, are presented in this way. This fugue is also an example of an invertible fugue in which each part of the so-called rectus may be inverted. A strict fugue is a fugue containing no episodes, or the episode's motifs are derived exclusively from the fugue's subject or counter-subject. The texture of Fugue 1 from Book 1 of J.S. Bach's Welk-Tempered Clavier, for example, is essentially constructed using only full or partial subject entries, either in a single part or in several. A free fugue is a fugue in which its episodes' figures are primarily constructed from new material not contained in or not directly derived from the fugue subject or counter-subject. For example, in this fugue by G.F. Handel, the episodic figures often outline unadorned suspension paradigms over a running eighth note bass. Handel does, however, also include episodes where the fugue's thematic material is used, such as here where the subject's opening 6 notes are used motivically in the upper part, while these notes are used in the bass. This figure is also included, which during the fugue, when combined with these descending eighth notes, is often used as a counter-subject. Friedrich Marburg adds that free fugues may contain a well-chosen secondary subject which is related in character to the theme or its counterpart. This may be seen in the final movement from Handel's Concerto Grosso, Opus 6, number 12, where a triplet figure is introduced in the fugue's middle and concluding areas. A close fugue is a fugue in which the subject and answer are in stretto. In Fugue 3 from Book 2 of J.S. Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier, the 3 subject entries are in stretto, with the third entrance in inversion. The metric distance of these entries is maintained in these bars, but here inversion is not used and only the upper entry is complete. For the remainder of the fugue, Bach tends to use only partial subject entries, although here the complete subjects and inversion are again used. An accompanied fugue is a fugue to which another part or parts are added, which primarily use free counterpoint not associated with the fugue's thematic and motivic material. In the Confiteor movement from J.S. Bach's B minor Mass, for example, while the continuo occasionally doubles the bass voice's line, it also includes sections of free counterpoint, such as at the beginning of the fugue, where it provides a bass part to the fugue's initial subject entries. Fugues based on a chorale may be composed in two ways, either using the chorale's melody or part thereof to construct the fugue's thematic material, or the fugue's thematic material is newly composed and the chorale's melody is introduced in longer note values in one of its parts. An example of the former type is J.S. Bach's four-part fugue on the chorale melody Jesus Christus unser Heiland, the subject of which Bach constructs around the melodic shape of the chorale melody's first phrase. Although Bach's fugue subject and the chorale's melody are essentially identical, for the fugue melody Bach makes some alterations, such as raising the fourth quarter note and tying and embellishing this note. An example of the second type of fugue on a chorale is this work by Johann Christoph Bach. As mentioned, in these fugue types, typically the chorale melody's contour bears no resemblance to the fugue subject, and as here is presented in longer note values in a single part. In fugues of this type, the longer note values of the chorale melody, when introduced, act like a cantus firmus to which the melodic contour of the other parts must conform. This does not mean that its presence is necessarily restrictive, however, as here Bach allows the alto's line to move above the chorale's F, and he connects these two statements of tonic F minor harmony with a first inversion leading note diminished chord, despite the note F not being part of leading note harmony. A fugato is an imitative section typically found within a larger work, which begins as a fugal exposition, although often not using the typical intervallic relationship between subject and answer. However, before developing into a full fugue, the fugato either ends or moves on to other unrelated material. 16 bars into the overture of his opera The Magic Flute, W.A. Mozart uses a fugato to reintroduce many of the instrument groups before then introducing other thematic material. For the remainder of the overture, although Mozart doesn't completely abandon many of the fugato's motifs, the usage is more thematic than fugal. A fugetta is a little fugue. This definition, however, is vague, as many fugues labelled as such can be of considerable length. The length of this fugetta by J.S. Bach, for example, is equivalent to or greater than many of Bach's other works labelled fugues. A ricercar is a fugue which includes various contrapuntal devices and is written in a strict contrapuntal style. Among the contrapuntal devices used in the ricercar R6 from J.S. Bach's A Musical Offering, for example, is this section where 4 of the ricercar's 6 parts enter canonically, with the remaining 2 parts containing partial entries. Here each part enters at the same metric distance, although Bach occasionally varies the length of the opening note, sometimes using a quarter note and sometimes a half note. I hope you found this useful. Thanks for watching. See you next time.